Danforth, and welcome to Seattle Real Estate Chat, where we meet once every week or two on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock. Me, myself, and Rhonda Porter, who's a mortgage lender here. Rhonda, would you introduce yourself?
I'm happy to, Jim. Thank you. I'm Rhonda Porter. I'm a licensed loan officer at Mortgage Master Service Corporation, and I'm also the author of a nationally recognized blog, The Mortgage Porter.
And actually, that's part of the main part of what we're going to talk today. Good segue, Rhonda. We have been getting a lot of pushback from sellers on the qualification letters that come from lenders. And a lot of that has to do with the mortgage regulations are much tighter, but it also has to do with that loans have been stretched out in length and details that were not required just 2 or 3 years ago. And some of them seem like ridiculous or small details are now being required, and sometimes late into the process, like at the last minute right before closing, all of a sudden the underwriter says, oops, I need page 5 that was blank on a bank statement from 2 years ago or something. And that truly is things like that sometimes that then slow things down and cause all kinds of havoc. So we thought we would talk about this because there is a great alternative that puts a buyer in a much better position when they're in a multiple offer situation, if other people don't have this, to give reassurances to the seller. Rhonda wrote a great blog about that. I think I mentioned it on the Google Plus page, but I'll put it in the notes here. Rhonda, you want to segue into that and talk about what I'm talking about, the commitment letters and all that?
Sure. There are oftentimes when a buyer is getting ready to make an offer on a home, they have an agent will require them to have a pre-approval letter, and that means that a borrower has talked to a loan officer and not only just done a verbal interview, but they've also completed an application, and that provides supporting documentation like their income documents and documentation to show where the down payment's coming from, credit's been ran, and the borrower has also probably been ran through one of the automated underwriting systems that are appropriate with whatever program that they're doing, FHA, conventional VA, for example, and have an approval. Sometimes they may have even gone through underwriting and had a human underwriter review the documents as well, depending on what that borrower scenario is like, how complicated it is. But more often than not, these letters are what comes from all this is just a pre-approval letter, and it may be signed by management or by the loan originator, and on letterhead too. So that's what's been typically required over recent history by real estate agents and to have an offer submitted on a home. So what is happening lately is that a lot of people, because this market is so competitive, is that buyers are considering looking at doing commitment letter. And that's basically the next step beyond a pre-approval letter. And so it's going to look a bit different. It also states that the borrower is actually fully approved, and this means that the underwriter has actually reviewed it. And if there's any conditions to the approval to the borrower obtaining the financing, they're all itemized out on this document, on this letter. So it's a bigger step, and it really shows I think more commitment from the borrower, and it takes a little bit more time to prepare because you are involving an underwriter to review the approval.
And just to take a step back from a realtor's perspective here, when I'm a listing agent and I've got 4 or 5 offers on a home, which is really common these days, and I'm looking at some of these pre-approval letters, they're all over the map. There is no standard for how that's done. It's not like a HUD settlement statement that you can look at and go, okay, yeah, because they all have the same format. They're required by law to follow a format. They are pretty much whatever creative writing class the lender had taken they want to practice. So you see wording that is very misleading to make it sound as flowery and as positive for the buyer as possible. But they sometimes never use the word pre-approval. They sometimes start out saying, this pre-qualification letter shows that this buyer is pre-approved, which is what? That's kind of saying you're 2 things. You get things all over the map, and then when they do say they're pre-approved, they do rarely go into underlying conditions, things that, oh, by the way, We still need to see a written credit report. We still need to see all of the bank statements. We still need to see verification of employment. We still need to see, and the list may go on, but you don't know that. They don't usually put that kind of thing in. So while, again, in context here from a realtor's perspective, I'm reviewing 5 multiple offers and we're wanting to make a decision within an hour or two based on what I've got in my hands, it's sometimes really apples and oranges and smoke and mirrors all together for us. So hopefully you can add a lot of clarity to this, Rhonda, because you deal with these all the time and you're very specific. I've seen your pre-approval letters year after year, and they're very, very detailed. So talk about some of the things, if you can, that someone like me, a realtor, a listing agent, would want to see in that letter that should give them some kind of comfort that this is really, really pre-approved well.
Right, right. You need to make sure that the letters address that the credit has been reviewed, that and based on the income being reviewed and documentation has been provided, and then also that the funds for closing have been verified and where those funds are coming from. Oftentimes, sometimes loan officers in our defense are not provided all the information we need, or maybe the borrower is, our home buyer is scrambling to find that bank statement, or they don't quite have everything together yet for pre-approval, but they're getting ready to make an offer on a home and they want to be able to present this. In those cases, sometimes the lender might be in a position where they have to leave that part out, of addressing specifically where the funds for closing are coming from or whatever. But the borrower has great credit, and we know they have the funds. They just haven't shown us the the statement that we need, or maybe documentation on where a large deposit came from or something like that. So so that can be one reason how come sometimes pre-approval letters have holes through them. And I think sometimes too, some lenders are, I don't want to say sloppy, but they may not take it so seriously. And it's very important. I mean, I often hear agents say that pre-approvals aren't worth the paper they're written on, and it's because sometimes, just because one's issued, it doesn't mean that loan is going to close. And that's, again, why a commitment letter that is coming from the lender and truly means, and should mean anyhow, that an underwriter has reviewed it and that this loan's going to close, subject to typically the appraisal being done, and possibly title report, because we typically don't have a title report until we have the property too.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back. You mentioned, and we talked about this before, about the details of that go into where the funds are at for closing. And I think we mentioned this a couple times, but it's worth reiterating. By the nature of the real estate contract in the state of Washington, you are saying that you do have all of the funds to close right now, every penny, except for what is documented somewhere else in the contract, and that's usually and almost always exclusively in that financing addendum. You're going to get a loan. You've got this much down, but the down payment and the earnest money and those things are considered to be cash on hand in your accounts, unless otherwise stated somewhere. And if that's not the case, let's say they're in a stock account, or they're in an overseas account and someone's going to be transferring them, or some other circumstance that's totally legitimate, and you know that you can get your hands on it, but it's not disclosed in that purchase and sale agreement. And I'm not an attorney, but this is my understanding of the real estate law, being a realtor, is that nullifies your full financing condition. So if something goes wrong in that financing process, you then don't have that to lean on as a way to get out of the contract, get your earnest money back, all those kinds of things. So having all that information in that pre-approval letter would technically be enough, as long as it's referenced in the purchase and sale. So if it said, regarding down payment of funds, see pre-approval letter as a notation, and then it's attached as an exhibit on the contract, good to go. We don't need to do anything more. If you've gone into depth of figuring out where all that is and disclosing it inside the letter, it just has to be there for the seller to see when they're signing the contract and agreeing to the purchase and sale. So I got off on a little tangent there, but it's one of my pet peeves, because many realtors don't press that home enough with the buyers that they're putting their earnest money at risk if they don't just disclose it. I have a number of buyers that say, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll get the money." I'll get the money? No, right. No. You have the money, right? And go into question and answer to get clarification on that, so that you can make sure and disclose that. or at the very minimum, let them know that they are basically putting their whole financing contingency at risk. Anyway, but I'll get off my soapbox about that. But there's other conditions and underwriting things that would be very helpful for brokers to know at that early stage. Can you list out some of them that maybe would give that a broker would want to know when they're looking at a pre-approval letter? That's a commitment letter, I should say.
Right. Well, and if it's a commitment letter, it should clearly state that, letter of loan commitment, something along those lines. I would say at the top of the page, and at least when I prepare one, it is separate from pre-approval letter. I mean, a pre-approval letter basically looks like a letter from me stating right up front in the very first sentence, we're pleased that you're pre-approved. And if they're pre-qualified, which basically means that it's just an interview that's done, there's no supporting documentation, or we're missing some supporting documentation, then it should just clearly state this borrower is pre-qualified for, and there might be some flowery language in there like, congratulations, and
sure,
we're pleased about this. But back to the loan commitment, it should be very clear that this is a letter of loan commitment. Common things that might be subject to or conditions to the approval might be when you have someone who is transferring jobs and we're waiting for that first pay stub or something like that. That'd be something that we would need like prior to closing. Or let's see, you've got me. Of course, I said appraisal already.
I just wanted to
subject to verification.
Sorry, I just wanted to interject. The ones that I see most commonly that I don't worry about is when, and they often don't use the word commitment letter. Again, it's sometimes semantics here, but they say subject to the property approval, appraisal of the property and title. And those two things don't worry me at all, because that's, as a listing agent, those are the things that I've been in control of the whole time. So I know I've got a seller who wants to sell and the property title is clear and ready to go and all of that. So when I see those kinds of things, I'm like, that's not a problem. It's some of the other stuff that, like you said, maybe pay stubs is not a big deal. Again, easily explained when you've got someone transferring and their pay stub will be forthcoming within a couple of weeks or something like that. But yeah, there are some others.
Right. Another one could be something along the lines of maybe verification of gift funds. Like the borrower has said, well, my mom and dad are going to give me $5,000, and it's absolutely going to happen. Yet we don't have the gift letter, or we don't have proof that the parents have the ability to give, because they have to provide their bank statements with that too from the parents. So that might be another thing that could be on a loan commitment letter.
Yeah, and that brings up another point. You're absolutely right. We run into that a lot right now because we have so many foreign buyers coming into the market, particularly from Southeast Asia and China. And some of those countries have some very limiting restrictions on how much money can be sent out of the country at one time. I think in China at the moment, I think it's $50,000 per person, or maybe it's per family. And so if you're putting, say, $400,000 or $500,000 down on a $2 million home, which happens, then they may need to have several people sending money in a variety of ways that may not even be, I don't even know if that's legal on their end from the Chinese perspective or the Southeast Asian country, whatever. But you need to document it. You need to kind of make sure that they have their ducks in a row and know the processes they need to do, whether they need to go through. Sometimes they need to go through, depending on the country, through an intermediate bank that then has the ability to do the conversion from their currency to U.S. funds and then transfer it again. And sometimes there's several days processing that, and sometimes it's hard to track. It's managers of different branches doing the job manually. I mean, handwriting the things out for people because they don't have a process in place, and therefore it's not like you can just pick up the phone and go, where's the money now? Is it, where is it in transit, and how much of it's in transit, and all that kind of stuff. No, anyway, just a side point. I've run into that several times. I work with lots of Chinese buyers and other Southeast Asian buyers, and so we have to work on getting these ducks in a row too. But anyway.
Right. No, so it can be, it's important just to clearly, read the pre-approval or commitment letter. But again, like the commitment letter is like one step beyond a pre-approval if it's done properly, and it might be signed by, the underwriter, and it's basically, the lender saying they are committing to lend. Where a pre-approval letter typically does not have that type of language. So, so there is a difference between the two. and I won't issue a loan commitment letter until it's been reviewed by management and underwriting for approval, just because it is more of a commitment from the lender.
So that's a good question. Thank you. That was very helpful, because that might be a question I might ask if I call the lender. Has this been reviewed by management? Has this gone through all of the underwriting, table funding, anybody who needs to sign off on it? Have they looked at it already? There is also another advantage to this that I've found, again, from the listing broker side, is that those buyers tend to be able to close much quicker. I've been seeing things at banks that sometimes take 30 or 40 days, able to do things in 2 to 3 weeks, and sometimes even shorter if they get the rush the appraisal. So I assume that's true in your situation too. If you've gotten through all that and you've got a buyer who's ready to move in quickly and a seller who likes to close quickly, that makes a difference, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing to look too for on a pre-approval letter and on a commitment letter is the expiration date too, because that'll help, like how current documents are and everything too. But yeah, you're ready to go. The only thing that you're waiting for is that updated title report, and oftentimes the title's already been ordered on a listing, so it just needs to have the buyer's information added and the appraisal, which can be rushed.
Right, right. Now I am seeing occasionally properties that, and this is a new one on me, I had not run into this until recently, some properties where when it's subject to just the property or commitment letter, that the lender wants to make sure that property is as squeaky clean as their buyer, and so they're actually ordering 2 appraisals and paying for that one of them out of their own money, out of the money they make on the points or whatever. Have you run into that too, where an underwriter may say, you know what, let's get a second appraisal. We'll pay for it, but I just want to have another look at this from another perspective?
That would be more common on a non-conforming mortgage. So,
Right.
On a higher-end home, the lender doesn't always pay for the second appraisal,
Right.
and a second appraisal isn't always required. So
Yes.
things
Yeah.
can be, yeah, it's going to depend on like how the loan's priced too, if they've built in that pricing for the appraisal to be paid.
Those are exactly the types of circumstances that I've run into at non-conforming, higher price luxury homes. Things that maybe when they did the first appraisal, they weren't confident that the appraiser had maybe enough background in that. So, for example, if you've got multiple docks out on Lake Washington, where the moorage of those docks has certain values, and that was that inspected properly and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes they really take a magnifying glass to some of that stuff that can still make that commitment letter take a little longer and seem a little drawn out. But again, they did say in the letter it was property specific was the only underwriting condition, and they're focusing on the property, so I can't really argue with it. But I do run into that.
Right. And some lenders tend to have that guideline where they require 2 appraisals more than others. So,
Okay. Right.
So it just kind of depends.
So good. Well, guess what? We've already gone through our 20 minutes here, but I think that this is a tool, and I can't emphasize this enough in our super hot market where almost every transaction of a nice home has multiple offers, that can allow a buyer to stand out. You're looking for that one thing that would get you in front of that seller in a more favorable light without breaking fair housing laws and all of the discrimination laws. We have to be careful not to say touting someone, oh yeah, this is a young married couple with kids and stuff. We can't say that kind of stuff anymore to try to have you stand out. So yeah, one of the things you absolutely can do is a pre-approval, go past the pre-approval, get the commitment letter, go past just the commitment letter, but have that buyer's agent make it very clear to the listing agent that that lender is available by phone, and have authorization pre-done with the buyer to the lender to make sure that the lender knows what they can disclose, if they can give credit scores or more information, that all of that's been pre-arranged so that the lender is comfortable and that doesn't feel like they need to worry about breaking any of the regulations on their ends, and share how greatly qualified they are. And again, listing agents love that. That's what we're looking for. We just want the deal to close, and we're nervous that we get these buyers that maybe have escalated up, and then something might go a little wonky. Is that buyer rock solid, so that we know that financing contingency won't be an issue? Anyway,
It's very important to.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quickly, but it's very important for buyers or people that are considering to buy a home to start this process, the pre-approval process, early, because especially if you're
Right.
going to do a commitment letter, it does take a little bit more time than a pre-approval letter, and so you can't start soon enough with the process with getting pre-approved.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's the kind of thing that's easy to procrastinate and put off, but it really should be the horse that's in front of the cart, the thing that you do at the very get-go before you're really even looking at properties. So,
Right.
okay, so that's about it. We have a new home buyer seminar coming up in September, right?
We do.
I think I've got the date here. I got September 13th, Saturday, September 13th, and this
That
time we're going to
sounds
be
right.
at the
Yeah.
Broadview Library. We've been kind of hopscotching around. We've been at the Green Lake Library and the Northeast Library over in Wedgwood, but I think this time we're over at the Broadview Library, which is just off of, it's on Greenwood, I believe, at like 100, I want to say 125th. It's right near there anyway. It's a nice newer library, so it should have a great facility. These things fill up fast, folks. I just want to let you know, if you want to come to one of these free seminars where you get the certification from the state of Washington Financing Commission so that you could get some of these low interest loans and other loan programs, these things fill up fast, and they're packed with information. We're there from, what is it, 11 to 4? Is that right?
Yes, we do it from 11 to 4. Yes.
Yeah, so it's packed, and we'll buy you lunch and all that, but you're going to come away with an armful of information on what you can do to get a home, better processes, and more information about how to get a home, what the processes are, and you know, all kinds of information and your questions answered. So anyway, I'll put that information down here if you want to sign up for that one. Anything else, Rhonda, you want to tell them a little bit about your blog before we go?
Sure, Jim. My blog is at mortgageporter.com, and it's been around, I think, over 7 years now, and it's a pretty good resource for consumers. I do write for consumers, and it's based off of like the questions I'm asked throughout the day. So if you are considering buying a home or refinancing, I encourage you to visit it. And if there's something that hasn't been answered or a question that you're searching out, please let me know, because it's probably a great blog post for me.
Yeah, and this particular topic was covered in a blog post you had, I think, about May, a couple months ago. But yeah, if you go there, it's one of the nationally acclaimed mortgage blogs out there. In fact, if you were to Google Rhonda Porter, you'll see that right away. She just shows up everywhere. I do too, but she's way more than I do. So anyway, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. We should be back next week, if not the week after. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day. Bye.
Have a great day. Thank you. Bye, Jim. Bye, everyone.
Bye.